Hello, folks. I'd like to talk about a topic today about the current situation of things, and I'd like to talk about a current sermon series that's going on, and what's going on in the process. Uh, I would like to entitle this sermon "The Last Supper of Ettore Alonso." Um, it has occurred to me there's some things that seem to be going on. I wouldn't really say seem to be, but I absolutely believe to be going on. And it takes a bit of an eye to catch it. Anyway, if you all have been, which I'm sure you have, anybody would know what I'm talking about here, have been listening to the latest sermons of Ettore Alonso on the I think it was the attributes of eating and drinking or something like that. Anyway, it's a sermon series on eating and drinking. Okay, so Ettore Alonso for years has been doing sermons on has been doing series of sermons, maybe like 10 in a series or 5 in a series. So really, whenever he puts out a sermon, it's kind of a whole series. Whereas if William Branham had have maybe done a sermon, it wasn't typically in a series. It was just one sermon. Although he might have preached the same one a couple times at different places, but it was he didn't really do a series. So, to me, whenever you listen to an Ettore Alonso sermon, you have to do the whole series to get the sermon essentially. So, what I'm talking about here is what I believe is going to happen shortly after the series of this eating and drinking series that he is on right now is over. There have been, in my opinion, plenty of hints dropped to figure this out. So anyway, but let's begin by putting it in perspective. It is a sermon series on eating and drinking. Okay, so that's the thing. And of course, it's to do with basically spiritually eating and drinking, and et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. That's just what it is. What is going on here? To go back and to recap a little bit of what he was talking about was he was talking about how that at least the things that I thought were significant. He's talking about eating and drinking spiritually, but to me, that's not what I'm interested in. What he was saying was he was saying that, and he didn't say this, but what he was saying was what he was talking about. Now, this he did say, but he didn't. What I'm getting ready to tell you, he didn't exactly say. But it's that's why I've come to preach this message, is to say what he didn't say, not what he did say, because what he did say to me is not much use. And I don't mean that to be mean, but let's just say this. Well, I'll try to clarify that later. Okay, so keep eating with me. Spit out the cherry pie seeds and keep eating with me here. Okay, so anyway, as William Branham said, if you're eating cherry pies, don't quit whenever you get to a seed. Don't just spit the seed out and keep eating the cherry pie or whatever. So anyway, just keep eating with me here just a minute, and I'll explain that. It's not as bad as it sounds. But what he was talking about was he was talking about a few things other than eating and drinking. He had mentioned that he was talking about how that William Branham said that the communion, that one of William Branham's last sermons was communion, right before he was he died in a car wreck. Okay, in 1965. So communion, I believe it was preached 12/12 of 1965, which 12 would go to signify the end, midnight, the stroke of midnight, the end of the thing. So anyway, he was talking about how, Tori Elianza was talking about how that the communion was, William Branham preached the communion, and then shortly thereafter he was taken off the scene. Okay, dare I might say officially crucified. So anyway, and then he said, if you look at, because communion, what is communion? Communion is eating and drinking. Okay, so William Branham's preaching a message about eating and drinking. Then he's taken off the scene shortly thereafter, and then he goes into Jesus and the Last Supper, and Jesus and his disciples eat the Last Supper, and then shortly thereafter, Jesus is crucified. Okay, so anyway, so the idea was to liken the Last Supper to the communion. Okay, or the Last Supper of Jesus to William Branham preaching the communion, which was a more spiritual type of eating and drinking, not a physical type of eating and drinking like Jesus and his disciples did, but it's the same thing. Okay, so it was to liken one to the other. Okay, so anyway, Jesus was telling them that the Son of Man, or whatever, has to be sent up to be crucified. And they're all like, what are you talking about? You're the Messiah. You're going to be here forever or whatever, or something like that, And the disciples, they just totally didn't get it. They were just, from what I can tell, they were probably more concerned about what was on the table, the eating and drinking, than, probably got more out of that than what Jesus was telling them, because they had no idea. So anyway, and I think it was the same thing with William Branham, was that William Branham's disciples at the time, probably they were just listening to William Branham's sermon, and they were just eating and drinking, and he was trying to tell them what was really going on and about to befall them all, and they had no clue. They were just more concerned about eating and drinking his message. Okay, so I'd like to bring all that up to today. It is my opinion that we have recycled into the exact same thing over again, because Tori Elianza is preaching about how that these times of eating and drinking led to a major change, in that a crucifixion, there's not much more of a major change that you can get than that, and that also the things that were going to come to be were already here working themselves. So anyway, what I want to say is that there's something here that needs to be caught. To me, Tori Elianza's disciples are more concerned with the eating and drinking. Let's say they're more concerned with the message about the eating and drinking. I wasn't concerned about Tori Elianza's message about eating and drinking. Okay, that's not what interested me. What got me was whenever I figured out that what he was saying, what he's really saying is that he's comparing these episodes of eating and drinking, and then what befell them next. So bring it up to what Tori Elianza was saying in his sermon. He was saying, here we got a message about eating and drinking. We got a series of messages about eating and drinking, and then in there he's comparing. He's talking about these eating and drinking episodes, and then he says that, and then he says that something is getting ready to be a major change. And I don't mean I don't know how to say this, but I don't know how to say this in a kind of a funny way, but the message has always been about change. Okay, all right. So, but this is not. He's talking about something different here. He's not talking about you need to change. He's talking about there's going to be a change. That's quite a different thing. Okay. He ain't talking about just you need to change. He's talking about there's going to be a major shift of the way things are done here, or the way things are. Okay. So anyway, given those two things, what I conclude is that right now, What he didn't say, but I suppose he can't say because it wouldn't fit the storyline, would be that you got to realize what's going on here right now. I'm telling you, y'all stick with me here, and you'll see what I'm saying. You can't look at it from the perspective of what he's talking about. What he's talking about don't even really matter, as weird as that might sound. The eating and drinking don't really matter. What I got of it is that he's talking about all these events, but I don't care about all that. I want to know what's going on right now. And what's going on right now, as far as I can tell, is that you got to look at what he's doing, okay? He is preaching a message right now about eating and drinking and saying that there's getting ready to be a major change, okay? So you need to understand that what he's doing is he is at his last supper right now. This is that he said all that to get you to think this. He can't tell you, but he's saying it to get you to understand where everybody's at. If you have whatever the understanding or whatever, then he said all that, and then he didn't say, hey, oh, by the way, this is my last supper. That's why I'm preaching this message on eating and drinking. But I'll bet you that's probably what he knows and meant. Okay, so anyway, because he's saying there's going to be a major change, and he's preaching all the while, he's preaching a message on eating and drinking, and saying that every time that there was a message on eating and drinking, there was a major change that followed it, and that's exactly what he said. Okay, so this sermon series right now of eating and drinking is the literal Last Supper communion of Atoriello Yonza. It's going on right now, okay? And as far as I can tell, everybody missed it, okay? I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but from what I gathered of it, see, I don't really associate on the forums anymore or whatever. But what Atoriello Yonza said, that all his disciples out here, see, he oftentimes talks about all these disciples, I'm not going to mention any names, but the usual suspects, let's say, are what they write in and say. Okay, so in the last sermon series of that sermon, he was talking about how that this one wrote and said was talking about some different way of putting what he had said about eating and drinking and how it was spiritually speaking. And he's like, this was good because they said this, and they were talking about that, talking about what he said about the eating and drinking, and they came up with some other way basically of saying it, and it was an interesting way of looking at what he was talking about, okay? All right, all that's cool, I guess, but for me, I don't care, okay? Because all that is that's not it. The disciples were there with Jesus, and they were eating and drinking with Jesus, but they did not get what was going on. They did not. All of William Branham's disciples were there with William Branham, eating and drinking the message of his communion message, and had no idea what was going on. Had no idea that he was getting ready to get taken off the scene, that was the Last Supper. They were there at the communion sermon and had no idea that he was preaching the literal Last Supper. Okay, and I think it's the same thing today. Everybody right now is listening to this eating and drinking that Atoriello Yonza is talking about, and they are replying. I could tell by the replies that they didn't really get it. They reply based on the eating and drinking, and that ain't it. The real understanding of this is to understand that this is the Last Supper, that his preaching about eating and drinking is the Last Supper. It is that this is the Last Supper, and that the disciples are eating, and that shortly, as he said, things are going to come to pass and be basically kind of like a dramatic change, just like they were every time else that this was preached, okay? This ain't got nothing to do with eating and drinking. This is That's what they thought. That's what they all thought. Every time Jesus' disciples, William Branham's disciples, they all thought, "Oh well, we're eating and drinking. We're eating and drinking this stuff." And now they think the same thing. They're eating and drinking. Tori Elian's talking about this eating and drinking. It ain't got nothing to do with the eating and drinking. Okay, now the eating and drinking. How was it that William Branham put it in the communion? I believe he said in the communion that it was an ordinance. That he had given them an ordinance essentially. It was an ordinance to do it. I think was the word he used. So this is just an ordinance. This is just the eating and drinking is not what it's really about. So anyway, so what I'm saying is that things are getting ready to change dramatically, and I don't know how. I'm not saying how. I don't know. It could be anything. I don't know how. I don't know. But as far as I can tell, and it's not like I'm really saying anything that Toriello Yonza didn't say, because this is what he said. I think he was trying to drop hints and say, hey, this thing's getting really ready to really change, because he probably knows what he's doing, because William Branham probably knew that he was preaching the communion. Jesus knew that he was getting ready to be delivered up, and that's why he had to go eat the supper. Okay, so William Branham knew the same thing. He knew that his time, he probably could feel that his time was about done, and he had to go preach the communion. So I would say that Toriello Yonza probably knows, he can probably see the writing on the wall, and knows that by doing this, that there's going to be a major change, and that's why he said that there was going to be a major change, and because he knows that he's preaching the communion, the Last Supper, the communion. He knows he's there. So anyway, so he knows that things are going to change, because he can see the handwriting on the wall. He probably feels it or whatever. I don't know. So anyway, so now, does that go to say that? Can I tell you how this is all going to go off, or what exactly is going to happen? Is Toriello Yonza going to cease to exist from the earth? I'm not saying that. I don't know. I don't know exactly how this will work. This is a modern age, and things work differently. Okay, like you got to figure. Jesus was crucified. Okay, William Branham, by the time he came along, everybody looked at crucifixion quite differently, and then now certainly even more differently. And though William Branham did die in a Ford station wagon, I guess, that does not go to say what will happen now. There could be I believe that there will be a death, but I don't know of what type. I don't know if it would be a physical death or a spiritual death or a death just to this era of love Divinic ideology. I don't know. I'm not saying, I don't know. I don't know what exactly this means. But I know that from all accounts I can tell, there's got to be a death of some sort. There's got to be a crucifixion of some sort, a final crucifixion of some sort. Okay? So, and the disciples seem to have entirely missed it. That's what's important right now, is that there is going to be a death. There is going to be, that's what he said. That's why he said things are going to change. And not just change, but I'm talking about a real change. I'm talking about a serious change, let's say. So anyway, to further make some of my point here, now what I'm saying is you gotta realize where you're at. You gotta step out from the eating and drinking at the table and being concerned about what Toriello Yonza said about eating and drinking and spiritually speaking, and how great that is. And you got to step out of that and realize what's really going on around you. Because William Branham, whenever he was preaching the communion, none of them guys, probably none of them, well, I don't know. But, in general speaking, none of them got what he was saying. None of them knew that he was really preaching about. He was really preaching the Last Supper when he was preaching communion in 1965. Nobody knew that. Okay. So, So anyway, uh, so to make some of to back up some of the points, like I said, the stuff that Hattori said that his disciples, quote unquote, quote for me, that they were writing in and saying, just showed to me that they didn't get the significance of where the thing was going, of what's up right now, and that they were concerned about the eating and the drinking. Like I said, if you could go back to the Last Supper of Jesus, here's what I think you would find. Let's put this in perspective. You would find that, there's Jesus, and then there's all the disciples, and they're all eating and drinking and talking about how good the food is. And then there's Jesus, and he's like, eat and drink because I'm gonna be gone soon, and there's something working now that's been here for a while, and it's the Holy Ghost of that. He was talking about the Holy Ghost then. I guess we've got a Holy Ghost equivalent now that's working and been working here for a long time, or whatever. And so, but anyway, he's like, I'm getting ready to go up and be crucified, there's something working here. It's been working, and it's gonna be here, but I'm gonna be gone, and in a manner of speaking, and so anyway, and they were like, oh. Yeah, sure, Jesus, you're the Messiah. You'll be here for forever. And there's like, man, this is some good bread. This is some good wine. That's what I imagine that they were doing. They were probably more concerned about the food. And they were like, what's Jesus going on about? Didn't Jesus say there was going to be some sort of major change coming? I don't know. I'm going to go back to eating my bread and wine. That's what I think it pretty much was. And so that's what I see is going on now, is that they're eating, the disciples of Hattori Alianza are eating this bread and wine, this stuff that he's talking about. And they're like, because the stuff that he's talking about, the base of the message, the meat of the meat and drink of the message is actually talking about eating and drinking spiritually. Okay, so they're eating that. That is their physical food now. And they're more concerned about that physical food, about what he's telling them about, this is how you eat and drink. And whatever, and this is how you're supposed to do it, or whatever, and spiritually speaking, and they're concerned about that, and then he's like, it's like, oh, by the way, there's getting ready to be a major change, and they're like, what's Hattori Alianza talking about, okay, so you have to see what's going on here. You have to understand that everything that was going on there is going on right here again. The disciples are talking about the food and the drink, and the Jesus figure, Hattori Alianza, is going on about, he's eating and drinking with them, but they're concerned about the eating and drinking, and he's saying, oh yeah, there's getting ready to be a major change, and they're like, what's Hattori going on about? That's kind of what I see of it. So what I see is that we're getting ready to have that major change, and like I said, I don't know how it will be. I don't know. But anyway, I had a few things to kind of evidences, I guess you'd say. When you make a case for something, you got to put some evidence in and say a few other things and this and that. So, you got to make your case a little better, because I can do that, but you got to show evidence in court case or whatever. So anyway, I would just like to say a few more things. For one thing, I think everybody has totally, for the longest time, been missing the point here. Okay, everybody has been eating and drinking and missing the point for a long time, long before this. I have always had a different take on this whole situation of everything that's going on, because hang on just a sec. I have always had a different take on the way things are setting up, or the way things are going. I never looked at it. I've always kind of looked at it from the perspective of, that for years, Toriel Young's, I listened to Toriel Young's preaching. He's talking about this or that, and I'm like, yeah, I don't really care. I'm like, I want to know what's going on. I want to know. Let's just say, if you could have been in William Branham's message back in the day, and if you had known that that he was preaching the communion and that he was going to die shortly, that would have been worth more than all he said in the sermon. The sermon is it's just not really worth that much. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it just ain't. Okay, let's just say, let's put it this way. Let me make it sound a little better now. This way, let's use Jesus for the comparison. If the eating and drinking, like I said, was just not as big a deal as knowing that Jesus was getting ready to be crucified. If you could have knew Jesus was getting ready to be crucified, that would have been much better than how good the wine and bread was. You see what I mean? Okay, so get mad at me if you want. But anyway, but that's the way I have looked at this for years. That's the way I never, because everybody would just, Toriel Young would say something and everybody's like replying to like what he said and saying what he said in a different way, and I'm like, I don't care. The only thing I care about is what's really going on here. I want to know what day we're living in, what we're doing, and this and that. Okay. And I wanted to know where we were at, what time we were at, what time is it, sirs? You know what I mean? So anyway, that's what I wanted to know. And that's, to me, that's worth more than all this talking about what a Toriel Young said and saying what he said in a different way or whatever all over the years. I just never cared for that. Okay, so anyway, now I'll give you an example. To me, for 20 years, see, like for example, Toriel Young's the other day. I don't want to demean that entirely either, but because the eating and drinking was, well, I mean, it was significant. I'm not saying it wasn't, so I don't want to totally demean that. But like, for example, Toriel Young's just the other day, he was talking in that last sermon, he was talking about, he gave a example of how that the William Branham people, it was pretty funny. The William Branham people were like the manna, how that they couldn't, they didn't even know what the manna was. The name, what manna means is what is it? Manna was the food that they ate in the Old Testament, and they didn't know, it was just what they ate in the wilderness, and they didn't know what it was. And they said, and so they named it what is it, because they didn't know, but they ate it every day. So Toriel Young is like, he says, well, that's what the Message people did. The Branham Message people was they've been eating this manna for 40 years, and they don't know what it is. They've been eating William Branham's message. They know to get up every day and eat William Branham's message, but they don't know what it is. Okay, so what is it? They know to eat it, and it sustains them in a way. But what is it? They don't even know. They don't even know what it is. Okay, which was a fine example. Okay, but to me, we've been saying that for like 20 years. Okay, you could go, to put that in perspective, we've been saying that type of stuff for 20 years. To put that in perspective, you can go to a message church that, and this is how they survive, okay, that 80 years ago, William Branham was here, whatever. You can go to a message church right now, and they can find something that William Branham said 80 years ago and find a new way to say it, a new way to talk about it, a new way to perhaps make a joke about it, make a point, just exactly that, and everybody loves it. And everybody keeps coming back next week because somebody has found a new way to say what William Branham said, and that was 80 years ago, okay? Well, that ain't doing nobody no good. It ain't doing me no good. They can have it, but it ain't doing me one bit of good. The same thing today. We've been saying for 20 years that the Message people did not get it. We've been, that they don't get what William Branham's message was really about. Okay, so now, up into this most modern of dates of 2022 of June, Toriel Young gives us example of how that they don't get it. Okay, well, we've been saying that for 20 years. What I'm trying to say is if you take something that has been said for a very long time and find a new way to say it, then that's That's fine and dandy. That's great. I can do that too. I enjoy that to some degree too. But that ain't doing us no good. The message people can do that. The message people can take something that's 20, 80 years old and find some new way to say it and make it sound interesting, and that's, that's okay, but that don't do me much good. Look, I'll do it. I'll do one for you right now. Okay. And I told this to somebody the other day, and I was like, wow, But then I also told him, I was like, this don't do you any good. But here, look, I'll do one. Okay. Let me tell a joke. Okay. I went back and listened after I got to catching all this. Where we're at right now, I was like, I need to go back and listen to that communion sermon of William Branham's to try to get a better idea on what's going on around me right here. So anyway, I go back and listen to that part of it, and he's talking about how that the Catholics didn't get their idea of the physical eating and drinking of the crackers and the water and whatnot, and he's like that's not the physical body of Jesus and this and that, and that basically don't do you any good. Okay, so I'm like, oh, okay, so these which I mean we knew that anyway, we're Branhamites, right? So post Branhamites. So anyway, so I'm like, yeah, okay. So then I got to thinking, I'm like, well, you could compare it this way. You could say, well, the Branhamite people have been, because this is pretty much what Toriello Yonsa did with the whole manna thing. But you could say that, well, the message people have been eating William Branham's message. They've been taking communion because William Branham's message was the communion. The things that he said was the communion, because that's what we're talking about here. And they have been taking that communion by listening to William Branham's message all these years, and it ain't done them one bit of good, because he was saying that's what the Catholics did. The Catholics said you got to eat this, drink this, eat this, physically speaking, and then there you go, you're good. And that's the way the message people look at it right now. They say, oh well, I listen to William Branham's message. So I'm saved or whatever. I'm this or that, and it ain't done them one bit of good. It ain't done them no much better. Listen to William Branham's message, taking the communion of listening to William Branham's message has done him no better than all the bread, all the crackers, all the soda crackers, and all the wine that the Catholics has drunk for the past 2,000 years. It ain't done them no better. These message people ain't done no better by listening to William Branham's message for the past 50 years than what them Catholics did for taking that bread and wine for 2,000 years. It didn't do them. They're no better off. Okay. So anyway, and everybody could say, oh well, I mean, maybe somebody said that before. I don't know. I never really heard it quite put that way, but maybe somebody said that before. And but whenever I told it to the person I talked to, it was like, it was kind of a new thought, and I was like, oh yeah, that's interesting that William Branham's message essentially was taking the communion, and they were just by taking that communion, they were doing no good at all. These people listened to it, and it was doing them no good at all. These Branhamites that thought they were saved by taking it, it's like the Catholics thought they were saved by taking the bread and the wine. Well, the Branhamites thought the same thing. They thought they were saved by listening to William Branham's message, taking that communion, and they're not. Okay, when I say saved, I mean they ain't got it. They ain't got what's really going on here. Okay, so anyway, I said all that to tell you this. What I just said is worthless. Okay, well, I can do that all day long. I can come up with an idea on something that has been said. We've been saying this for 20 years. Okay, that the message people didn't get it. I mean, do we really, if we come up with 100 more ways of saying that the message people don't get it, what good does that do us? If we come up with, if the Branhamites, it's no different than if a Branhamite down here comes up with another way to say what William Branham was saying, that the Pentecostal people didn't get what he was saying. It's all a waste of time. It's all a waste of time. Okay? It's kind of cool, but it's all a waste of time. Okay? So, it's like the disciples eating the bread and wine at the Last Supper. That was kind of cool. We got the famous picture of it, but it was somewhat a waste of time. because it really wasn't what was important. It just had to be done out of ordinance, out of, whatever. And, it's like, let's just say this. If somebody thinks that they are essentially saved, or saved now is like having the understanding, I suppose. Okay, because we don't look at saved the way we looked at it before. So if somebody says that they are saved because they're capable of understanding what Atoriel Yonza meant whenever he said that they are eating the manna, that the Branhamites don't get the fact that they don't even know what William Branham's message is. It's manna to them. If somebody can understand that, then that don't mean nothing. That don't mean that they're saved. God is able to rise children of these stones to Abraham, or whatever, however that went. That ain't it. If you can get what he's saying, that ain't it. Okay? That's no better off. The Branhamites could do that with the Pentecostals. They're still doing it today. 50 years from now, somebody will be, after this thing's done far moved on from what it is now, somebody, you probably still have a Toriello Yonza cult person out here that's come up with listening to this sermon or something, and come up with a better way to say it. And what good will that do? Okay? That ain't got nothing to do with it. So that's cool and all. Like I said, I can do it too. I can come up with 100 different ways. I'll come back next week and give you probably 50 of them if you want, if I'd sit down and think about it. But what good would it do? Okay. So anyway, that's just the eating and drinking. So, but to know what's going on, that's the real thing. Like I said, they could eat and drink, but to know that William Branham was getting ready to be killed and go off the scene, that would have been great. To know that Jesus was getting ready to be crucified, and then they just went right on. He just said it in passing. He just said, I'm going to be delivered up to be crucified, and they're like, what? Went back to eating, and that's what Toriel Yonza has done here. He's like, it's getting ready to be a major change, and they're like, what did they reply to him about? As far as I could tell, what they replied to him about? What he was talking about, the eating and drinking. They were replying about the food. Okay, that was not it. They were talking, what was it was what he said in there whenever he just in passing was like, I'm going to be crucified tomorrow. And like, oh, yeah, and he went back to eating and drinking. See, I can tell by the way, like I said, I could tell by the way that these Toriel Yonza's disciples apparently replied to this stuff, that they were like more concerned about the food. They were more concerned. What did they reply? They replied to him about, what he said about this particular thing on how you should eat and drink spiritually. About, you should change and you should eat and drink spiritually in modern form instead of an old form. Okay, that's what they were talking about. That's what they replied to. And I'm like, that's not it. That's the eating and drinking of the food. What the real thing to catch was to catch what he said about, there's going to be a real change, which was essentially him saying there's going to be a real change is a crucifixion of sorts. That's what's really important here, to recognize what's really going on, not to just eating and drinking don't matter. Okay, look, it don't matter, folks. It's irrelevant by comparison. Who cares how good the bread and the wine was when Jesus was getting ready to be crucified? Who cares? Does anybody today comment about the bread and the wine and how good it was? You got people that are doing that still to this day, and they totally missed it. You got the message made the same mistake. All they could do was comment about how good William Branham's message was and missed that he was the Messiah. So what I'm telling you is that right now it seems we have the same situation, is to recognize that everybody's talking about how good Toriel Yonza's food is, how good the food there is, with the man at the man's house with bearing the pitcher of water, the Aquarius. Okay, they're all talking about how good the food is there and how all this and that, because that's what. Think about it. This is Aquarius. You got Toriel Yonza, the Aquarius. Okay, so he's like, this is, wasn't it that they went to there's like, go find this, we're going to go eat in this guy's house, and you'll find a man bearing a pitcher of water. Okay, well, that's Aquarius in astrology, bearing a pitcher of water, the water bearer. Okay, or whatever. So anyway, so then, what was I saying? Anyway, then they go in there and they're eating, and they don't know they don't know what is going on. The disciples did not know that William Branham was the Messiah. Okay, so my question is today, do they know what the Messiah is right now? Do they know what's really going on right here? Do they know who the Messiah is? Do they know what's going on around them? Or are they just concerned about the eating and drinking? That's what William Branham's people, all they were concerned about was what William Branham had to say, and they missed who he was. We know this from the third coming. We don't, because the third coming come along later and figured it out, that what they had done was they had just been eating and drinking with William Branham, and they did not see that he was the Messiah. Okay, so what we have now is an equivalent of that same type. Because I can tell, because they didn't reply about it. They were replying about the food and the drink. They were replying about what Atoriello Yonza said, but I didn't see anybody, maybe they did, but I didn't see, I haven't heard of anybody that replied and said, hey, this is what's the Messiah is getting ready to be crucified. That's what was important. That's what the message people flat out missed. Okay? They flat out missed it. And it didn't do them any good. They could eat with Jesus all day long. It didn't do any good. Okay? Then Jesus had to come along later and be like, hey guys, you guys missed it. You guys, some of them will probably get it later on. They'll get what they missed right now, but for now, all they're doing is talking about the food and the wine. And it ain't going to do them no good. They're missing what's really going on here. What's really going on here is that this is the Last Supper. That when this sermon series is over, I don't know how long it'll take, but when this sermon series is over of this eating and drinking, the disciples are eating the Last Supper right now. And once this is over, then it's going to be shortly thereafter, there will be a crucifixion of sorts. Like I said, I don't know how. I'm not saying anybody will die. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that, but there has to be some sort of a death. Like I said, if it's nothing but a death to this age type of thinking, this like Ludovinic type of age. Another thing is this. Another thing I'd like to say, I think you all probably get my point. What I'm saying is this, you got to look at what's really going on here. Let me say this. I got to pull this little part up here. Okay. Another couple things that I noticed that Atoriello Yonza said was that, and there's probably a few things probably a few hints and this and that I probably didn't even get. Maybe I'd go back and listen to it. I could figure it out. But nonetheless, a couple other things that he said was that, a couple other things that he mentioned was that, in that sermon, was one thing that he said that the thing that was getting ready to be, it was already at work right now. Okay? Well, now I figure that must be something to the effect of the Holy Ghost equivalent by comparison to Jesus, because didn't he say that the Holy Ghost was already in the world and working now? And then he gets taken off the scene. So the Holy Ghost is already here working now. I figure there's an understanding that has been here for a long time, that's been working, and nobody even knew it, because they were trying to figure Jesus out. Well, they certainly didn't know nothing about the Holy Ghost at the time. So I think that's another thing that's going on here. I think for a while that there has been a Holy Ghost equivalent working its way here, it's weaving its web here, and nobody, even while Jesus was there, it was going on, and nobody knew anything about it, certainly at that point. So I figure that this thing, this mindset, this way of thought that has been working itself around here that nobody even knew about, is getting ready to perhaps go to the forefront, because the Holy Ghost was what went to the forefront after Jesus. See, what happened? Jesus goes off, he gets crucified, and then he comes back a few times. He's like, hey, you guys missed it. And they're like, oh, this is Jesus, We're talking to Jesus here. And a few people, and then people finally started to figure out, hey, what really went on there. and whatnot. And then the Holy Ghost came. Okay, so what I assume must happen here is that a few people is probably going to have to this thing's going to end now, or sometime here soon, and then what's going to be is it's going to be people are going to come back. Like I said, this is working right now. That's why I'm saying this right now. Is that before it ain't even happened yet? No, it's already in process. This mindset is already in process out here. It's already working. So the crucifixion's going to happen of sorts, and then a few people are going to get it and be like, realize what really it was, what the heck's really going on here. A few people already know, and then the Holy Ghost is going to come to preeminence, which was here all along, which is here right now. It's already working. That's what Don Parnell said. It's already here. It's already working. That's what he was saying. He said there's something. He said we're getting ready to have a change, and something is here it's going to be here, but it's already here. It's already been here. Okay. So anyway, that's what as far as I can tell, that's what he's saying. Now, secondly, another thing that he said was he was talking about John 6:66. And he said that, at that point, the disciples stopped following Jesus. Okay, so why is he talking about that? Okay, well, now, if we go to John 6:66, see, there had to be something. There was something out here. Jesus said something that made him mad, for lack of better words. Okay, he just made him mad. It was like, well, we don't, it says in here, they said, well, that was a hard statement that he made, or something like that. So anyway, and then it says, look, here's John 6:66. From that time, many of his disciples went back and walked no more with him. Okay, so that's exactly what Torrey Alonso was talking about. He said, there came this point that many disciples stopped and walked no more with him. Okay, so anyway, so what that probably is what did Jesus say that offended them so much? I don't know. He was talking about, let's see. Okay, here's John 6:57. As the living Father has sent me, and I live by the Father, so he that eateth me, even he shall live by me. Okay, even so he that eateth me. And 58. This is that bread which came down from heaven, not as your fathers did eat manna, and are dead. He that eateth of this bread shall live forever. Okay, well that's exactly what he's been talking about. Okay, he even mentioned talking about the manna. So where I'll tell you this, where do you think you're at right now? What do you think he's talking about? What do you think's really going on here? Because he's talking about eating the manna. He gave you John 6:66. Well, you go back and read a few before that, and it's exactly what Jesus is talking about. And he was ready to be delivered up and be crucified, and the disciples had done left him because what was he preaching about? He said, what was it? It was, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not going to read the thing because I don't get into it that much. But the idea was that. Look, let me just put it to you this way, guys. I got to go fishing. Dad's going to be here, and me and Kathy's getting in a canoe, and we're going to go fishing down on the New River here in a minute. I ain't got time to read all these scriptures, and I don't care to. Okay. So anyway, I'm just going to make this short. Okay. All right. So anyway, I don't know. I'm not going to go back and read and find out what Jesus said whenever he, quote unquote, I'm just going to say it, whenever he pissed them off, whenever he pissed off all his disciples and they wouldn't follow him no more. Okay, I'm not going to go back and read what it was that made him mad. I don't know. It was if memory serves, it was maybe it was the time he said, before Abraham was, I am, or this or that or whatever. It's just normal stuff that Jesus made everybody mad by saying it was, we all know to be true now. Okay, so anyway, that's what the stuff was. Okay, so what do you have here? You've had, this has probably been said for a while now. There was certain things that have been said that, there was many disciples. I would assume it's probably like this. Torrey Alonso at one point had many disciples. Okay, and then at some point, a large portion of them would not follow him anymore because they didn't agree with his ideas on, God and Satan being one or whatever it was. All right. That was probably the modern equivalent of Jesus having said, and I'm sure this is what he meant whenever he said this, because I think I've heard him say this before. That was probably the modern equivalent of Jesus having said, whenever Tori Alonso came out and said God and Satan are one, that was probably the modern equivalent of Jesus saying, before Abraham was, I am. It's the same stuff. It just repeats over and over. Okay, so anyway, so that was probably that. Okay, so what I'm saying is that John 6:6 has already been fulfilled. Okay, and now we're over into the Last Supper here. That's what he was saying, and then on top of that he's talking about John. That's what he was talking about was eating and drinking. So this is all where it's supposed to be. He mentioned John 6:6 because there he goes. He was talking about eating and drinking. Maybe that's what they got mad about him at. That eating and drinking his body or something like that, And that's what maybe they're mad about it now, eating and drinking his sermon or whatever. Now maybe it's more up to date. Maybe the disciples got mad because he's getting mad all the time because he's talking about eating and drinking right now. That's what he was talking about in John roughly 6:6. So maybe that was what it was. Maybe it's a dual purpose meaning there, but nonetheless, maybe that's what it was. And maybe, disciples getting mad or whatever now, and they don't follow Tori Allianz anymore. Maybe that's what he meant. Okay, so anyway, John 6:6 fulfilled itself. The communion, the Last Supper, is fulfilling itself right now, and with all the trimmings, no pun intended, with all the trimmings, because the disciples are not getting it. Okay, well, if you could draw a picture, if I were a painter, I would paint a picture of a Tori Allianza and all his disciples out here, and that would be the same thing. Nobody's really getting it. I could tell by what they're saying, they don't really get it. They're concerned about the bread, and Jesus is saying something about getting crucified, and they're like, that was just in passing. It's like, not so, Lord. So anyway, that's what it is. Watch and see. Watch and see. Don't you don't have to believe me. Just watch and see. So anyway, I guess that's about it. I've pretty much said what I wanted to say. Let's see. Was there anything else before I let y'all fine folks go down the road here? Seems like there was, but you always can't think of something. There's always something you can't think of when you're preaching. What else could I say on the subject? Well, I guess I could say, I'm not going to make any defenses of anything. So, I guess that's about it. Anyway, y'all have a peace.